call us to order. We do have a very busy day today, and what I would like to do is, because it's so critically important with the governor's rural health transformation grant, thank you, phone a friend, like for us to work that one. Then we will hear our three bills, and then we will work the other bill that we heard on Friday. So, I'm going to call your attention to a couple of amendments that I had Jason do. So we are doing 339, which is the recess and presidential fitness test bill. And I have a couple of amendments based on things that were said in committee. And so the first amendment that I have is the one I already told you that I would do. It defines, it reduces the recess portion to the elementary grades, and it's phrased in a very specific way that addresses that some elementary schools have a sixth grade, so that this does not apply to them, but I would say good luck to the elementary school that doesn't give sixth graders recess when everybody else does. But we stay out of there. It also has some of the technical amendments that Revisor Long mentioned. Jason, would you like to add anything else as an explanation for my amendment?
No, Madam Chair, members of the committee, it just simply leaves the designation of the elementary grades for the minimum 30 minutes recess to the district to designate, except that it can't go above grade 5. And then, yes, there is the technical amendment on line 33.
Thank you. Any questions for Jason on the amendment? Seeing none, I would move that my amendment be passed favorably. A second from Representative Steele. Last chance for discussion. Representative Featherston.
So can we just clarify, sixth graders that are in elementary school, does the school have the discretion to give them recess?
Yes, they do. It just doesn't mandate that they do.
Okay.
Representative Stogstill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I checked this, certainly in Shawnee Mission, that at least twice a week, our elementary schools have 1 hour of physical education. And so I remember when I taught back then that when they had an hour's worth of physical education, we usually didn't have either morning or afternoon recess, depending on when that PE class was scheduled. Would that allow the schools to take that into consideration, or would they have to have?
So we're on the amendment right now.
Oh, okay.
So if we can save that question for the bill. Yeah. Any other, Representative Pishney?
Madam Chair, I have a number of concerns with the bill, but with the amendment, I will be opposing it simply out of principle, because I absolutely agree that it should never have been amended to include 8th grade. That just wasn't appropriate at all. But out in Finney County, we have, in at least one district, we have 5th, 6th grade centers. And I don't know if they're categorized as elementary or not, as far as whether an elementary school goes to 6th grade. Now, that may, in full transparency, that may not last forever, but I'm just saying I think it may cause those kinds of dilemmas in other districts as well. Thank you.
The intent of the amendment was to add the flexibility to the definition to cover those situations, but let's have Revisor Long clarify whether or not that applies.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the amendment as worded would allow the school district to designate its elementary grades, provided that it did not designate any grade above grade 5 as an elementary grade for purposes of the required recess time. So for a building such as a 5-6 building, it could designate that as not being elementary grades, and therefore the recess requirement would not apply to that particular building.
Any other questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I will close my motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, same sign. And the amendment passes. I have another amendment. Jason, would you like to explain that? Basically, this takes into consideration what Dr. Harwood had to tell us on Friday, and it basically takes effect after the standards for the presidential fitness test are published. Jason, would you like to add anything to that?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, yes, it would not require the development of the state test until after the publication of the presidential physical fitness test standards. We also note that the commencement year is being moved to line 11, which corresponds to our typical statutory fashion for directions to school districts on what they need to implement and when.
Any question for Jason on the amendment? Seeing none, I move that we pass the amendment favorably. Is there a second? Representative Wolf, thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, we were heard in a hearing that the presidential fitness test is not standardized yet or is not out there. What happens in the fall of 2026 if there's still not a presidential fitness test? Are we giving two different standards here?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, it is delegated to the State Board of Education to establish a state physical fitness test under the bill, and then directed to the school districts to annually administer that fitness test. To the extent there is no standard state fitness test to administer beginning in school year 26-27, then the school districts would not be able to implement the statute.
Any other questions or discussion? Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe this was discussed on Friday, but I might have missed it. But what's meant by an award is presented for the students who meet or exceed the standards set by this test? Is it just certificate? Is it?
Without them having defined it, we kind of I can only look back to past history, and that's what I remember never getting as a child, since I never passed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about the amendment? Seeing none, I will close my amendment. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, same sign. Does anybody else have any amendments for this bill? Seeing none, we can move to discussion on the bill. Representative Stogsdill, I'll let you begin with your question, please.
Yeah, I have same question. As I said, Shawnee Mission, I know they have a physical education class, I think at least twice a week in our elementary schools, and those go for around an hour. And I'm just wondering if we would also have to have a recess scheduled then, in either that morning or that afternoon, depending on when the physical education class was being held.
Revisor Long.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, on page 2 in lines 1 and 2, the definition of recess specifically does not include any time spent in physical education class. So the 30 minutes of recess would be scheduled for a time outside of any regularly scheduled PE class.
So, well, if that's the case, then the anybody who's taught primary grades in elementary school knows that you don't have a 15-minute recess. You have a 25-minute recess because when it's cold, it takes 10 minutes to get the kids all bundled up and everything, go out for 15 minutes, and then 10 minutes to get them unbundled and back. So that seems a little bit, especially if you're going to have an hour PE class that day, it seems like that would be an excessive amount to keep away from academics on those years. I'd be against that. And can I speak about one other piece here? Okay.
Yes, you may.
The other thing that really bothers me about this is the Kansas State physical fitness test, where it said that I had kind of what I think what Representative Schreiber was asking about. The State Board shall provide an award for students who meet or exceed the state's 50th percentile. I was very lucky when I was in elementary school. I was usually a little bit bigger and maybe a little more athletic than some of my friends were at that point in time. And I remember taking some of these tests and so on and seeing some of my friends who were maybe smaller, not very athletic, that sort of thing, that were absolutely humiliated in these things. And I think to give awards to people who are in the top 50% of these physical fitness tests, I just can't imagine what it would be like if you were a third or fourth grader or fifth grader and you couldn't even get in the top 50%. I think these are, I wouldn't never be able to vote for that. But anyway, thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple things. I believe when Dr. Harwood was here the other day, he said KSD already has 30 minutes carved into each grade for recess. So even if you have a PE class for, I'm guessing probably 45, 50 minutes, you should probably already have a 30-minute recess somewhere in the schedule. The other thing, I was one of those, well, the other thing, welcome back. When we talk presidential fitness, I was one of those that couldn't pass it. But I do remember setting goals that we would maybe do extra sit-ups or something, that you would improve yourself. So I think it's open to improvement and advancement. Then there's others, though, that could push themselves even a little bit more. So I think it's a welcome task.
I lived through it, and I'm okay. But, so I appreciate your point for that. I mean, it's just you win some, you lose some, and that's part of life that you have to get used to. Any other feedback on the bill? Representative Getz and then Featherston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have any more information on this second portion of the bill really applies to the rural transformation health plan? Do we know if that requires an annual test or if that can be spaced out in every other year or once in high school, once in middle school, twice in elementary? I mean, does it have to be annually, or is there any flexibility as we're trying to apply this to that?
Jason?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the bill requires an annual administration of the physical fitness test, but the committee is free to amend that to change the timing and frequency of when the test would be administered.
I just wonder if there could be some language in there, this isn't a conceptual amendment yet, to basically say, run parallel with the expectations set out in the rural transformation grant program.
I'm going to have Elena review what's in that grant, because I think that might be helpful for the committee's conversation. Elena?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. In the application for the Rural Health Transformation Program, there are a couple mentions of the presidential fitness test in one of the sections. of the application, it says, "The state does not presently mandate school districts to administer the presidential fitness test. It is a matter of local discretion, and the state is committed to reestablishing the mandate by the end of 2028. So it doesn't address frequency in the application.
Thank you. And is it the same in the other place that you said it's mentioned?
Madam Chair, the other mention is by 2031, all rural Kansas counties will achieve statistically significant, and then item number 3 under that heading is improvements in children's performance on the presidential fitness test.
Okay. So it's mute on the specifics, if that helps you.
It does. I mean, it sounds like an expectation of annually is a little bit built into it of if you're trying to make progress and you're waiting 2 or 3 years to get results again. I mean, it's maybe similar to our assessment program now to where those don't happen every year for every student, but during specific years. Anyway, I just wanted to check if there was any language that we needed to not go overboard on, but be congruent with. So thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I looked at this bill a lot over the weekend to try to figure out if there was any portion I could support. The recess part is kind of ridiculous to pass because all of our grade schools have recess now, also local control. I'm like, okay, so if the recess part left, could I support the second part, the physical fitness test? But since that test also doesn't exist at this time, and there are little to no data that supports that physical fitness test does anything to help kids, I can't support that half either. So I'm a no all the way around, but I did try to find a way to support any portion of this.
Thank you, Representative Brantley, and then Pishney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the meat of the recess part of this bill is the fact that on the first page, line 22 through 24, recess should not be limited or withheld for disciplinary reasons. I can't tell you how many times I did recess duty for 12 years. And kids would come out and have to sit on the wall as they're disciplined from the classroom, or they would have to walk the fence. I think one of the main important things here is that you can't withhold recess. Let them go play. So I just want to share that.
Thank you, Representative Pishney. Yes, you may.
Madam Chair, Representative Pishney, the first part I read said, "The state does not presently mandate school districts to administer the presidential fitness test. It is a matter of local discretion. The state is committed to reestablishing the mandate by the end of 2028.
Representative Pishney, I was asking Jason if a governor has the authority to make such an executive order, and the answer is that they do not. So the governor could not do it through an executive order. And right now, it is up to the districts. So that's the best information I have for you. I don't know that I necessarily answered your question real well, but okay. Any other questions or discussion? Representative Stogsdill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I totally agree with Representative Brantley about withholding recess as a punishment. The kids that usually, at least in my experience, that had that punishment put on them are the ones that needed recess as much as anybody else, if not more. So, but there again, that is an issue that can be totally addressed at the local school board level. And I just don't see why we need state legislation to regulate recess policies across the state, which I'm sure every school board in the state already has. So again, I would be opposed to this entire bill.
Thank you. Representative Boatman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also agree with Representative Brantley that one of the parts of this bill that I emphatically support is the prohibition of withholding recess as a form of punishment. I think that does nothing but to stigmatize and other our school children. Under that context, I would be opposed to much of the reading about the presidential fitness test for the same reason that giving out awards would work to other and stigmatize the children that, again, can't pass that test. Besides the fact that the test is still like, seems like some amorphous idea in a cloud somewhere. And the fact that schools also already, elementary schools already provide recess, and I really appreciate that. I agree that we should keep that at a local level. So, in short, I appreciate the part of the bill that says not to punish kids by taking away their recess, but outside of that, I would disagree with the bill, and I wouldn't support it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments? Representative Schmoy, and then we're going to move along.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As far as the conversation that we're having and where some students get awards and some students don't, I will remind the committee that we also have spelling bees, and I couldn't have passed that. I firmly believe that they invented spell check and predictive text for people like me. So we already in schools absolutely award some students who excel in some areas and students who excel in other areas. I don't see this as being any different. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, the chair is going to call the question. This is to pass, or the chair makes a motion to pass the bill as amended favorably. Is there a second? Second from Representative Brantley. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, same sign. No. The chair believes the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Thank you all for a very robust discussion. Representative Boatman, Featherston, Stogsdill, Ruiz would like their vote recorded. All right, so now we are going to move into our bill hearing for today, and we are going to start with Senate Bill 381, and we are going to give each conferee a minute. Thank you. I'm like so careful about making sure our hearing audience could hear us. Let me just get that bill folder very quickly. Okay. We are going to start with Nicholas Reinecker. Nicholas, you have 1 minute. We do have your testimony, so if you would like to hear, I'm sorry, I'm skipping Jason. Whenever you give me that odd look, thank you, Jason. Jason, if you would like to describe the bill for us, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 381 would enact a new statute to require the State Board of Education to develop age and developmentally appropriate curriculum, materials, and guidelines for students in grades kindergarten through 12, and then direct school districts to provide instruction based on that curriculum and materials to those students on the understanding of communist and socialist regimes and ideologies. I would point out that the Senate amended the bill to specify that it would be instruction on the negative impacts of communist and socialist regimes and ideology. The other part of the bill is an amendment to current law. Current law requires students enrolled in in high school grades to take and pass a course on American history and civics. Section 2 of the bill would amend that statute to also require any student enrolled in 9th grade on or after this July 1st to pass an American civics exam. This would be required and be based on a 100-question exam based on the naturalization exam that's given for naturalizing U.S. citizens. Students with an IEP would be able to take the exam subject to that student's IEP with all accommodations. I will point out the Senate amended the bill. This would be applicable to all public schools, and it is also applicable to all accredited private or parochial schools. And the Senate added an amendment on page 2 to define accredited to mean accredited by the State Board of Education, including dual accreditation by the State Board of Education and another accrediting agency. The bill passed the Senate on final action on a vote of 26 to 14 and will go into effect this July 1st. Happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions for the reviser? Representative Ruiz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Jason, just for a point of clarification, we're going to mandate parochial and private schools to teach the difference between socialism, communism, and social studies in government. Is that correct?
No, the Section 1 is applicable to school districts. It's the American Civics exam is applicable to accredited private schools.
Is there anything that we mandate, I would say, I call it a mandate, to private schools right now in the state of Kansas?
With respect to curriculum, no, it's just, well, it is this American Civics and history is currently applicable to accredited private and parochial schools. That's under current law.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Reviser Long? Seeing none, thank you, Jay. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Hubert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does the statute that already is in place that requires a student pass a civics class, is this tying into that or replacing that requirement, or how does it work with existing statute?
This would be an additional exam. It could be part of that coursework if the district so chose, but they have to take a course as one part of the statute, and they have to pass the civics exam as a separate part of the statute.
Representative Stogstill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, would they start giving this American Civics examination? What level?
Students could request to take it as early as 7th grade, but any student who's enrolled in 9th grade starting next school year would have to take it.
Okay, just real quick, a follow up on that. So if someone chose not to take it until their senior year, and they had a 3.85 grade point average, but they didn't pass the civics test, would that mean they didn't get their high school diploma?
It would be a requirement for graduation, yes.
Thank you.
Jason, they could take the test there's nothing that limits the number of times they could take the test.
No, there's not, and there's discretion of the school district to administer the test as part of the American Civics course, if they so choose.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jason? Seeing none, thank you, Jason. Elena, would you like to give us the gist of the fiscal note, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. According to the fiscal note prepared by the Division of the Budget on the bill as introduced, the Department of Education indicated enactment of the bill would require the agency to review history and government curriculum standards for students in grades K through 12 with guidelines developed by the state board, and the state board would also need to review those recommendations. The department states it would need one-time expenditures of $30,200, all from the state general fund in fiscal year 2027, which includes $7,200 for 144 hours of facilitation time at a rate of $50 per hour, including virtual and in-person meetings, as well as follow-up meetings, $7,000 for travel and stipend costs, including subsistence expenditures for 20 attendees, guidance, printing, and training costs at $6,000, and accessible test conversion costs at $10,000. And then the Kansas Association of School Boards indicates enactment of the bill would require school districts to either purchase curriculum or spend staff time to develop curriculum for the bill's requirements. And administration of the new exam would also increase administrative expenditures, but they are unable to estimate a fiscal effect.
Thank you. All right, we are going to go to our conferees, and we will start with Senator Starnes. Thank you for being in committee today. Welcome back. And while we're welcoming back, it's really wonderful to have Representative Wynn back with us today. Senator Starnes, you may begin. And conferees, we are doing a hard 1 minute. We have your testimony, and I would highlight what you think is most important for us to know. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee. In the 1 minute, you've got the bill, and I provided information as to the why. You can see as far as the statistics go and what is happening with our students and Americans as they are the younger ones as well. But the bill doesn't, some things just to reference, the bill doesn't circumvent the Kansas Constitution. The legislature has long, well-established history of mandating certain types of instruction in public schools. They already require instructions in the United States, Kansas history and government, financial literacy, career and technical education standards, health education, and computer science. I think the other thing that it is specific to, it's, again, it's routine and well precedented as far as mandating curriculum standards. There's opportunities within the materials for the state board to develop those. They also develop what the passing score is. Local control is how you administer it, what you choose to meet that particular thing. People ask about the test. You can retake the test. It has provisions for IEP students and disability students, and they can start as early as 7th grade and teaching that.
Senator, you're out of time. Would you
Thank you for your time.
Would you
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Senator Starnes? Representative Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. Could you talk a little bit about why communism and socialism were highlighted and no other forms of government were?
Sure. Highlighted because based upon the data that we have and the information that's on the U.S. citizenship test to meet that mandate.
Follow-up question?
You may.
Is there a reason fascism was not also included on the list?
No, ma'am. There was no reason other than just what we'd taken from the information, communism. You could have fascism in there if you choose, and if it's relatable in the test, then they could be also chosen to teach that within the standards that are already maybe within the State Board of Education. So I appreciate your question. Thank you.
Any other questions for Senator Starnes? Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. Would this take the place of when we learn about what all happened in the world wars in world history, or is this in addition to?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question. No, it's in addition to just making sure these things are covered.
All right. Thank you very much.
And the accountability piece, I think, is very important, and we're here to make accountable The situation is such through the state school board, and as I said, the Constitution allows that, and it's been mandated over time, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the conferee? Senator, thank you for being with us. I believe that Nicholas Reinecker is on WebEx now. Nicholas, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, and please remember we have a 1-minute timeline today.
Very well. Thank you. Nick Reinecker, Inman, Kansas. I do support this bill. I think there is an absolute truth in what we do. In the beginning, God made man and woman, told them to be fruitful and multiply. And we've chose to kind of go against the grain on some of that. And so we need to make sure that our children are learning about how the Americas was founded, how much importance the civics test is, because we've seen with the No Child Left Behind and all these other movements where we've forgotten a lot of this stuff for our children. And in fact, even now in our current state of Kansas, we are mingling socialism issues such as state-owned gambling and the Chiefs deal and everything like that. So we want to also mentor and make sure that we're setting a good example for our children, and also teach them this stuff that we want to teach them about the evils of any type of stuff that's not truth. So I do appreciate
Nicholas,
you.
you're out of
You're questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the conferee? Seeing none, Nicholas, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Our next conferee is Joshua Reynolds. Joshua, welcome to committee, and again, 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for your time. In a study of American civic literacy, a majority of Kansas respondents failed a multiple choice version of the U.S. naturalization test, answering fewer than 60% of questions correctly. It's likely much bleaker for Kansas youth, as across the country, fewer than 1 in 5 Americans under age 45 can pass the same test. There's no time to waste. 1 in 3 Americans age 18 to 29 say they hold a favorable view of communism, and that number rises to nearly 2 in 3 for socialism. As a result of these trends, only 63% of Gen Z and millennials believe that the Declaration of Independence guarantees freedom and equality better than the Communist Manifesto. To quote James Madison, "Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives." This bill establishes accountability to ensure the adequate teaching of American civics and basic historical facts to address the twin issues of civic and historical illiteracy, and I would be very happy to receive any questions.
Thank you very much. Representative Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. How much of this civics test deals with socialism and communism specifically?
So the American civics test primarily deals with the structure of U.S. government and American history. This bill somewhat addresses 2 issues in conjunction, providing for the teaching of history and of the communist and socialist regimes and ideologies, and also for the development of a curriculum to do so by the State Board of Education. Additionally, it establishes a requirement to pass the U.S. naturalization test, or not the precise test, but a substantially similar civics examination.
Did that answer your question, Representative?
Could I ask a follow-up?
Yes, you may.
So is the civics test mainly focused on the American system of government and how that operates, or does it focus on these other systems of government and how they operate?
So the American naturalization test primarily focuses on how American government operates, and a few examples of questions on that current version of the test are: what is the supreme law of the land? That would be the U.S. Constitution. How many senators does each state have? What is the highest court in the United States? Or turning to the historical portion, what U.S. war ended slavery? What people were brought to the United States as slaves? George Washington is famous for many things. Name one of them. I'd be happy to provide any additional information if that's helpful.
It sounds like we could learn all of those things outside of this bill. Thank you.
Any other questions for the conferee? Representative Featherston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was flipping between screens a little quickly and missed. Are you Joshua Reynolds?
Yes, Representative.
And then could you clarify where your organization has its home base?
Yes, Representative. Our organization has its primary office in Austin, Texas. We work in states across the country to advance policies supporting liberty, accountability, and transparency, as this bill does.
Okay, thank you, and my apologies for not catching your name right off the bat.
Any other questions for the conferee? Joshua, thank you for being here with us today. We will now go to opponent in-person testimony, beginning with Dr. Carlskin. Dr. Carlskin, you have 1 minute. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee. With only a minute, I will just say that, this certainly slaps at local control, which has been a cornerstone of Kansas public schools. School boards, teachers, and curriculum professionals are best positioned to determine how to deliver high-quality instruction and meets the needs of students and communities. Mandating specific ideological content for the state level risks politicizing curriculum decisions that should remain educational and not political. The challenge we face is not the lack of mandates, it is ensuring that schools have the time, flexibility, and resources to teach these subjects well. I won't take a great deal of your time. You've seen me enough before, you know where we stand. Thank you for your time.
Dr. Carlskin, would you like to stand for questions? Any questions for Dr. Carlskin? Representative Hubert?
Would you, and as a superintendent in the association, I've lobbied the Department of Education for years to go back to objectively testing not just civics, but history and social studies, which has been replaced with a subjective way of evaluating whether our students are learning these topics. Right now, we have no objective way to know, and what we do have is just a pretty clear, as you talk with students that can't answer these types of questions, would you be willing to support objectively testing in these 3 areas?
Representative, you and I have had many discussions on this topic for several years. And to get to your point, history, civics, and government.
Social studies.
Social studies are all taught in schools. That, there is a cumulative exam at in these courses. So to say, would I support an objective test to test on those? I can't say that I would. I think, we've got that in place through the coursework already.
But the state no longer objectively tests in those areas.
I know it's not a state assessment, but it is through the coursework and completing graduation requirements.
Thank you.
I thank you. Any other questions for the conferee? Seeing none, the chair will recognize Leah Fleiter from the Kansas Association of School Boards. Welcome back to committee, and you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your indulgence. A lot of our opposition was covered by the previous conferee. I would note that we do feel that instruction of kindergartners and that early grade in socialism and communism probably is inappropriate and rather complex for that early age level. We feel that this bill has been drafted without really looking at the Kansas state standards for high school graduation. I did put them in my written testimony for Manhattan High School, which is my high school, and also represented by Senator Starnes. We're also concerned about the requiring a student to take a test to graduate from high school that doesn't really align with what their grade point average might be and that type of thing. As a former school board member and spouse of a constitutional law professor, the Constitution is what guarantees us treatment and equality, not the Declaration of Independence. And I will be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Any questions for Ms. Fleiter? Seeing none, thank you for being with us today. And tomorrow, would you mind checking with Michelle, or Michelle is going to check with you to make sure that we have your written testimony. I move to WebEx testimony and Tom Barker. Tom, you may begin, and you have 1 minute.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tom Barker. I teach 6th and 7th grade social studies here in Kansas, and I have a PhD from the University of Kansas in social studies education, where I primarily focus my research on civic education. And though I really agree with a lot of the concerns that the proponents and in previous bills similar to this that we've heard, I have several issues with this bill, and primarily that the solution of this bill is contrary to relevant research. First, the research has indicated that non-school factors such as family home lives, peer and social networks, media consumption all have a higher impact on political identity and future political involvement than school factors. When we look at the relevant research, especially a lot of that coming out of NCLB, we see that high-stake testing relative to civic education has been shown to have absolutely no statistical impact compared to those of adolescents who don't take the test. And when we talk about terms like civic efficacy, we're talking about how they identify politically their own beliefs and how they see their own participation. My own research and the research of others have shown that there are other solutions that we can do in the classroom that would lead to these positive outcomes and high-stake.
Dr. Barker, you're out of time. Would you like to stand for questions?
And I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time. So,
And that would be now. Thank you very much. Any questions for Dr. Barker? Seeing none, Dr. Barker, thank you for being with us in committee, and I apologize, it's not much time to all of our conferees. It's that time of year. Our next conferee is Mary Sinclair on behalf of the Kansas PTA. Mary, you may begin.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'm going to start with the Kansas Constitution, Article 6, noting that the State Board of Education shall have general supervision of public schools, educational institutions, and all the educational interests of the state. The exception there is for laws delegated by the State Board of Regents. I would argue that recent precedents of state-mandated education standards requirements by state lawmakers does not make this potential mandate correct or right either, nor actually a very good example of the test of how U.S. government is intended to work. This bill mandates that educators render ideological judgment rather than teaching through established practice of working with students to compare and contrast, and leaving ideological judgment to parents and students. This bill imposes a graduation requirement outside the authority and process of the Kansas State Board of Education, a process that is evidence-based, thorough, intentional. Unlike this bill, the origins of this bill are not even from a groundswell of Kansas. It's an ALEC bill, the American Legislative Exchange Council, whose mission is of limited government, free market, and federalism. That's straight from their website. The recent Board of Education Task Force didn't make this recommendation either.
For questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any questions for Mary? Representative Hubert.
Would you agree that our current state constitution already has in its place a requirement to pass a civics constitution government class? So, state statute, that's what I meant.
So there are graduation requirements that for high school associated with history and social studies, and those education standards embed the content of this bill. So students are required to learn this content in their due course of graduation requirements. Is that what you're asking?
My question is that there is a statute that already requires this.
There is.
You're aware of that?
Well, are you talking about the mandate from about 10 years ago around the?
No, it's been in the Constitution for quite some time. In the state statutes.
I would say the Rose capacities drive what our students should know and to be able to do. And that's been demonstrated in 2 Supreme Court cases, Montoya and Gannon, and that our State Board of Education drives the educational standards by the Rose capacities.
I think I might add a little clarity to the question. KSA 72-3217 requires all accredited public schools, private and parochial, to provide and give a complete course of instruction to all pupils in civil government. And then 72-3218 are the Rose capacities. So I think you're talking about 3217.
I think I did answer the question that those are courses that are provided that address that content. I'm sorry, I believe I answered.
Thank you. I was just trying to add clarity because I think a lot of people in the room look confused. So,
Well, and again, the point is that it's already a requirement for graduation in statute.
So why are we adding? So I guess I would ask, what is the purpose of this bill and adding a graduation requirement that's 2.5 times as long as the state assessment and outside of what the State Board of Education has recommended? And to cite previous, I mean, adding high stakes requirements to graduation requirements does not equate to, I think, the goals and objectives you're trying to achieve.
thank you. Any other questions for the conferee? Representative Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This isn't necessarily for the conferee. Just as the newbie in the room, could I be edified as to what the representative is speaking about that is already required? Oh, could you reiterate? I'm still confused.
Sure. If you'd like to write that down, Kansas statutes annotated, which we commonly refer to as KSA 72, that's going to be which chapter of our statutes something is in. 3217 does have law in there that requires certain instructions, certain things to be taught, and then, but passing the test, I don't believe is in that section, but, so that's what this bill would do that is different, is adding the civics test, and it drills down on some of those topics a little bit more. You're welcome. And I remember when I was a freshman and people would come to me on the side and say, I'm glad you asked, I didn't remember. So no question is inappropriate on understanding what we're talking about. Any other questions for the conferee? Seeing none, Mary, thank you for being with us today. And I believe our next conferee is Rob Maddox.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, Rob, welcome to committee. You have 1 minute. You may begin.
Hi. I was a 21-year social studies teacher here in the state of Kansas, and I now work with the social studies teachers in Wichita. I wanted to give you kind of a ground level opinion and view of this. As it reads, that we will teach kids an understanding of the negative impacts of communist and socialist regimes and ideologies. Currently, we do not try to preach from one side as good or bad. We present information, have the kids analyze. I would also say that we teach comparative government already in 7th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. I'm worried for K-5 that this would be developmentally inappropriate for the kids. That is more about local, town, county, and tribal government. We don't get into comparative government in elementary school, but we have really worked hard with our social studies teachers, not preaching at the kids, presenting them all sides of an issue and teaching them to analyze. And that's what our focus has been.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. You didn't say that you concluded, and if you were taking a pregnant pause, I didn't want to cut you
I'm
off.
sorry.
Would you also like to stand for questions?
Absolutely.
I've got the first one for you. Could you please rename the grades that have comparative government?
That's in 7th grade geography. They learn about governments all over the world. In 10th grade geography, they learn about international societies and their governments. In 11th grade, we learn a lot about communist Russia and the Cold War. And in 12th grade, there's a whole unit on comparative governments, and those are already in what we teach. And again, I've really worked hard with our teachers. Don't preach, present information objectively, and teach the kids to analyze and draw conclusions and debate it.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for the conferee? Representative Featherston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If teachers were required to preach instead of teach, especially to young grades that this is possibly inappropriate to, could that be compared to indoctrination?
You know what? It would take a lot to get an elementary school student to learn what's being asked in this bill. And there would be some pretty heavy persuasion in that room. And just as my opinion as an educator who grew up in Kansas, who's taught in Kansas and works in Kansas, that statement gets a little bit too much into the particulars there for me.
Any other questions for the conferee? Representative Vice Chair McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So interesting, you say you don't preach, but do you point out the difference, the positive, the negative? Capitalism's created the largest middle class in the world ever in the history of
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
And the bad, I'm going to say socialism that takes that away. You're telling me so what side of that, how do you not preach but teach, I guess? Tell me how you,
we present the pros and cons of each, and I will tell you, since we're not in front of students, it would be really hard to study these topics and not walk away with a logical conclusion. But we do not load one side of it and present it. We present the pros and cons of everything. We try to let documents, historical documents and data do the talking instead of kind of loading the scale on one side. And then we have the kids analyze it and reach that conclusion. I only see in the bill that we would teach the negative impacts of communist and socialist regimes. That wording makes it seem like you want the teachers to go in maybe more weighted on one side, and we try to present that to them and have them analyze it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Any other questions for the conferee? Seeing none, I believe that I have called on all of our conferees. If there's anybody that I accidentally missed in the room today, seeing none, I'll close the hearing on 381, and we will move to Senate Bill 406. And Jason, would you like to explain that bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 406 would enact a new statute that would require the governor, in consultation with the State Workforce Development Board, to approve workforce training programs for the federal workforce Pell Grants. These would have to meet requirements to be eligible programs as provided by federal law under the Pell Grant expansion for the workforce Pell Grants. The Workforce Development Board would establish internal process for institutions and programs to apply for approval for eligibility, coordinate approval of the programs with other state and federal workforce programs to prevent duplicative funding, and also align and leverage available state and federal monies to support the implementation and expansion of these workforce training programs. As I said, the requirements of this section would be consistent with applicable federal rules that govern these workforce Pell Grant programs. The bill did pass the Senate on a vote of 40-0 and would go into effect this July 1st if enacted. I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the revisor? Seeing none, Elena, would you like to give us the fiscal note, please? Or Nicole, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. According to the fiscal note prepared by the Division of the Budget on the bill for SB 406, the Department of Commerce estimates additional SGF expenditures of $95,000 in FY 2027 and $94,500 in FY 2028, and an additional 1 FTE position for both fiscal years. The agency states that $500 in FY 2027 would be a one-time expenditure to develop a new web page to share information regarding the program, and the remaining $94,500 and the 1 FTE in FY 2027 and the entirety of that same amount in FY 2028 would be for the salaries and wages of the program manager. The State Board of Regents stated that an additional administrative duties created by the bill could be absorbed within existing resources, and the Office of the Governor indicated the bill would have no fiscal effect.
Thank you very much. We are going to move straight into testimony, and we're going to begin with Heather Morgan, the Executive Director of the Kansas Association of Community Colleges. Welcome to committee.
Welcome. I think this is my first time here this year, which is crazy. I'm Heather Morgan. I'm the Executive Director of the Community College Association. We are in favor of this bill because, quite frankly, we have to do it because it's already been passed in the Big Beautiful Bill. Right after the first of the year, we contacted the governor's office and said we needed to get going on what the beautiful bill said we had to do. There's now been a group that is being sort of co-coordinated by KBOR and the Kansas Department of Commerce that has been convened. I am on the group along with a community college president, some people from the Department of Commerce and Department of Labor. What we will do is create Workforce Pell, which means it's a new Pell grant for very short-term training programs that meet about 4 or 5 different outcomes. One of the things is the program has to have been in place for a year. It has to basically produce living wages. It has to be in high demand, high need, or a critical need field in the state of Kansas, so that this group will develop all of the rules in accordance with the federal rules and start this program in Kansas. So this bill just codifies in Kansas statute what the federal statute already says has to be done. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
2 seconds to spare, and you got a lot of quality information in there. That was impressive. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much and for your support of this. You kind of briefly mentioned it about the Workforce Development Board. Does the federal guidelines outlay that? I mean, because normally when we see a bill like this, it's like the governor gets one person and the speaker gets, so I'm just curious, what really is this board?
So the federal workforce funds, WIOA is what we know them, both federally and at the state, those flow through the Kansas Department of Commerce, and they have local workforce boards that work with the local workforce centers. And so that's trying to braid an educational funding stream with the Department of Commerce funding stream with, given what's happening with the Department of Education federally, that's how this is all sort of getting together.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Representative Getz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Heather, do you think this is going to offset some of our CTE through the region side? Like, how do you see this playing out as far as, and because we know those are rising quickly, and we just had a budget presentation on it just last week. Do you think this will help curb that by being able to share some of that expense, or do you think both of these are going to continue to exist in tandem?
So the presentation last week was just about high school students, so this has nothing to do with that. That will not affect that. This bill will not, Workforce Pell won't affect high school students at all. What this will do is allow some high school graduated students to take part in potentially getting federal financial aid for very short-term programs which they can't today. So some people think that this is going to change the world. I don't think it's going to change the world. I think it's going to move the world 5 degrees. So for example, if you had a CDL program that is currently below the threshold of time in the classroom that is required for a federal Pell Grant, now it can become federal financial aid eligible through this program. So students who couldn't afford to go to get their CDL before can take part in federal financial aid. But because the program had already been in existence for a year and has to meet these strict requirements, I don't think it's going to be a huge number of programs, certainly initially, that are impacted. But as we go forward and more emerging occupations are coming into existence and more short-term training is developed, that's when I think this becomes more widespread.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Representative Brantley, and then Shriver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. So this makes me kind of wonder, and you said this has nothing to do with the high school side, but what if a student's coming through the workforce apprentice program? Would this be able to push them farther with some financial?
So let's not get into all the details about apprenticeship, but let's say that they're in an apprenticeship and they need to get the related technical instruction. So that RTI, related technical instruction, they come to a community or technical college. If, for example, they needed to get that CDL first, this could potentially pay for the CDL. If they were stopping their apprenticeship there, that would be fine. The one concern or caveat is once you start the clock, even for Workforce Pell, there's a certain number of years you have to complete your Pell Grant. And so it's really important for people to understand how this new change might impact things. And I'd probably be foolish to not mention there is a major shortfall in funding for Pell Grant at the federal level.
Thank you, Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Heather. You mentioned CDLs, but can you give a couple of other examples of high-skill, high-wage occupations that an 8 to 15-week training program would be, that would qualify them for a high need, high wage.
To be quite honest, the only one that we've identified right now that we think is probably going to meet this is probably CDL. There could be some very short-term healthcare programs like as new technology emerges and you need to learn how to use a new imaging machine or something like that, something in that realm. But there's very few programs that are this short in nature right now. But this is sort of looking towards the future and trying to be innovative.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Seeing none, Heather, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. I do show that we have Christian Bernard on WebEx. Christian, you may begin.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, can you all hear me?
Yes, and also please remember you have 1 minute. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Christian Bernard. I'm grateful to testify today on behalf of FGA Action, and I would strongly encourage you to support Senate Bill 406. I just want to highlight that the importance of this bill is that states need to approve short-term workforce training programs in order for them to qualify for the funding which becomes available in July of this year. I'll underscore too that federal law provides strong expectations for programs that should qualify. So for example, eligible programs must have training, completion, and job placement rates of at least 70%, and completers must achieve adequate wages to justify program costs. I'll also underscore that Kansas does not need to start from scratch in developing an approval process for Workforce Pell. So Senate Bill 406 leverages the state's existing workforce development infrastructure and casts a wide net for quality programs, positioning Kansas for prompt, effective implementation. I'll underscore too that this is just different. Pell Grants have traditionally been reserved for credit-bearing, longer-term degree programs. So this is a shift in that Pell Grant funding will be available for non-credit programs now.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you. You're out of time. Would you like to stand for questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Any questions for the Representative Schreiber?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Bernard. So I'll pose to you the same question I asked Heather just before you. What kind of programs for high skill, high wage jobs just take an 8 to 15 week training program?
Madam Chair, Representative Schreiber, thank you. So I would agree with the previous conferee that CDL is probably one of the most promising ones. And yes, short-term healthcare training programs. I've looked at a lot of other states, and the kinds of programs that you see that are typically in this length, stuff like EMT programs, sometimes welding programs. There's a lot of healthcare related occupations that fall into this range. But as the previous conferee said too, part of the issue here is that this is not an area of training that's been eligible for entitlement like aid, like Workforce Pell. So the importance here is that, yes, right now there might not be a huge range of programs, especially in Kansas, that would qualify, but community technical colleges all over the country offer all sorts of short-term training programs, usually in healthcare. Early childcare could be another one. Phlebotomy, that's a specific example that comes to mind that I see in a lot of states.
Yes, Representative Schreiber, you may follow up.
Thank you. Yep. Yeah, EMT would not be one that would be completed in 8 to 15 weeks. I was once an EMT, and it took a lot longer than that. But yeah, that's interesting. You know, early childhood or early child care programs too. Probably high need, but I'm not sure on high wage. But anyway, it's just interesting to find out what would actually qualify for an 8 to 15 week program. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for the conferee? Thank you. Christian, thank you for being with us today. I show no other testimonies or anyone in the room I may have accidentally overlooked. Seeing none, I'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 406. And we will move to Senate Bill 340. And Jason, I'll have you begin, and then research will have you guys give us a fiscal note. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 340 amends one statute. It's part of the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program 74-32-274. This statute limits Kansas Promise scholarships to a total of 68 credit hours or $20,000, whichever occurs first. Additionally, scholarship awards cannot be used for prerequisite classes unless the class is a designated course in an eligible program. And it cannot be used for remedial courses unless that course is offered in a co-requisite format. Under the bill, it amends that last limitation to prohibit the use of these Promise Scholarship Awards for any remedial courses, including any remedial hours that are offered as part of a co-requisite course. And so the award monies could not be used for any such remedial hours that are part of even a co-requisite course format. The bill passed the Senate on a vote of 40-0 and would go into effect on July 1st. If enacted, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Revisor Long. Any questions for the Revisor? Seeing none, thank you very much. Nicole?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Nicole Bergman with Legislative Research, and according to the fiscal note prepared by the Division of the Budget on the bill as introduced, the Kansas Board of Regents states enactment of the bill would have a negligible effect on the negligible fiscal effect on the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program.
Thank you very much. We will move into testimony, and we are going to begin with Heather Morgan. Heather, before I start your clock, I'm predicting that after your testimony, people would ask you what the difference between the different types of co-requisite and prerequisite and so on. So I think it would be easier for people who are less familiar with the program if you answered that question now, and we won't hold that against you on your time, but then they'll be able to understand your testimony better. So would you like to explain the term co-requisite and its friends?
Yes. So let me start by some of the people around the table have asked me about remedial education. And so remedial education means that the students' skills, knowledge, and abilities are not up to par to be able to enter into a college level course, which would be getting credit towards their degree. So a remedial course, for example, might be beginning algebra. That beginning algebra is not going to count towards their degree, but they've got to remediate their algebra skills in order to be able to be successful in college algebra. That practice has been somewhat disproven to be effective because you've got to take a course before you can take an actual credit-bearing course towards your graduation, and so people don't always make it through that sequence. So a few years ago, Kansas has moved to a co-requisite model, and I will just say before I explain what co-requisite is, people say, well, do you have more or less remedial students than you used to have? That is a very difficult question to answer because we now use multiple measures, which include high school GPA. So if you think about what's happened with grade inflation, you may be getting into a course that you've had good high school grades, but your skills still may be subpar. We also have students who opt into a remedial or co-requisite course who want to make sure that they get into KU pharmacy school. So they want to make sure that they get an A in that course, so they choose to enroll in a course with extra support. So the way the co-requisite model works, and we have lots of students who just opt into a co-requisite model, is so college algebra would be a 3-hour course normally. We now have a 5-hour course, so it's college algebra with review. Those 2 other hours that are the with review are co-requisite hours. So rather than sticking them in intermediate algebra, you got to pass that, then you go to college algebra, so now you've taken 6 credit hours, but only 3 of those are going towards your degree. We're going to put you in a 5-hour class where you're taking the real class, but you're getting extra support towards your degree. So remedial meant nothing. None of those hours are really counting towards your degree. Co-requisite means that this course is counting towards your degree. You may have 2 extra hours at the end, but you are taking that degree-seeking course. So, Madam Chair, do you want me to stand for questions on that? I know it's a little confusing.
Yes, we'll take questions on your answer to your question before we get into testimony. Any questions on what you just heard? Okay, seeing none. Heather, if you'd like to begin your testimony now.
So the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act is the only 2-year sector state scholarship. It is focused on the most high demand, high need, critical need careers in Kansas. It pays for books, tuition, fees, and supplies for students, and with a 2-year live and work requirement after the student completes their program. As the Promise Act was initially passed by the legislature. It did not pay for remedial courses. The bill, as introduced, was not going to pay for co-requisite courses. That would mean all 5 hours would not be paid for. In the Senate, they put on a very good amendment that would say, we're still going to pay for the base 3 hours, we're still going to pay for college algebra, we're not going to pay for the extra 2 hours, which is sort of parallel to what they were doing earlier with the remedial courses. So previously wouldn't pay for the 3 hours, now we're just not paying for the 2 hours of help, but we are paying for the base 3 hours. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the conferee? Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Heather, thanks for your explanation of that, whatever that term was, co-requisite. But are there any programs that are excluded from the Promise Scholarship? Because I've had people from Southwest Kansas say they're having difficulty getting access to the Promise Scholarship for CDL.
So we just talked about Workforce Pell, CDL, you have to take a minimum of 6 credit hours, it's either 5 or 6 credit hours to be Promise Act eligible. So we've had people have to take CNA and first aid to get to that, it's 6. So 5 hour CNA plus 1 hour first aid to get to that 6 credit hour. CDL is certainly not 6 credit hours, and so you have to take CDL and something else to be seeking a certificate to be Promise Act eligible.
And maybe that was the issue. Thank you for that explanation.
Any other questions for the conferee? Seeing none, Heather, thank you for being with us today. It's good to see you this year. We also have written proponent testimony from Claudia Aguiar from the Manager of Kansas Policy and Outreach Aligned. And then we have neutral in person from Vice President Elaine Frisbee with the Board of Regents. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have copies.
Michelle is not feeling well today and knowing the difference between what to share and not share.
I do appreciate that. Thank you. I want to set a few things correct. So the Promise Act, Senate Bill 340, sorry, we at the Board of Regents, of course, administer 22 state service scholarships and other scholarships, many of which are available to students attending the 2-year colleges in addition to the Promise Act, like the nursing service scholarships. So they have access to more than just the Promise Act. The multiple measures reference that was made earlier by Director Morgan, that was an optional launch for our 2-year colleges back in fall of 2025 and will be fully launched in this coming fall. And my colleague tomorrow will be joining you, Dr. Jen Bonzracki, to talk to you about co-requisite developmental education and the need to remediate some of our high school graduate students. So happy to talk with you tomorrow a little bit more. But specific to this bill, I am here to speak on behalf of the students who would potentially be recipients of the Promise Act. This bill will require them to either pay for the cash for those additional credit hours themselves, or take a loan, or seek other financial aid opportunities. But for that impediment, they may decide that they can't pay for that and make up for that expense. The co-requisite credit hour demand for someone who might need a gateway math or English course, it could be 0 credit hours and no additional cost. It could be 1, 2, or 3 credit hours. And so we're just talking about several $100s, but that alone could be an impediment for some of our students. I would expect that those courses, if they're necessary for their program, they would be early in the program and they would learn very soon whether or not they would have that expense. The problem, if that doesn't happen for some reason and they do enroll and they start a program and they get a Promise Act award and they don't finish their program because they cannot come up with that cash, then they have to stop their program and they owe us back their award. So then we get into that sequence. So I'm alerting you for that effect on students. From the state's point of view, the fiscal effect, as mentioned earlier, would be negligible for the $10 million program. It's several $100s for a student, but that might mean a big deal for an individual student.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the conferee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us tomorrow. And as was mentioned, you'll get a little bit more information tomorrow. I show that is all the conferees I have for this bill. Is there anyone I might have accidentally missed? Seeing none, we have a few minutes. We will be working the bills that we have heard today tomorrow. So what I would like to do is get a little, I would be surprised if we finished working the other bill from Friday, the recess bill. But I'd like us to go ahead and at least get started on it so we have more time for tomorrow. No, the crisis bill, thank you. 263. So we're going to shift gears a little bit and on 263, I did ask Jason on Friday for a couple of amendments. One was to move where we located the opt-out language and the technical amendments that he mentioned in his testimony. So Jason, if you'd like to share that and explain those. Jason, you may begin.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 263 is a bill that would require the State Department of Education to adopt best practice guidelines for conducting active shooter drills, and then require the Board of Education of each school district and the governing body of each accredited non-public school to adopt policies on the conduct of active shooter drills that are consistent with those guidelines that are published by the Department of Education. The amendment you see here addresses the language that was left hanging at the bottom of page 2 due to conflicting floor amendments in the Senate. This language was addressing a provision to allow a parent to opt their student out of participation in an active shooter drill. You'll see that language move to page 4 and line 29, so that nothing in the section would be deemed to supersede or limit the ability of a parent or person acting as parent to opt their student out of participation in an active shooter drill.
Any questions for Jason on the amendments? Y'all look like you're reading, so I want to just slow down a second and let you read. Representative, you're welcome to ask your question out loud if you prefer. Go ahead.
I was just curious on, just looking at real quick, on the curriculum. We were told there would be a list of acceptable evidence-based curriculum. I didn't know if the KSDE had that list or if that would be coming or if that'd be something we could add.
So, okay, so not about this amendment. Okay, sorry, we can certainly discuss. Any questions for Jason on this amendment? Seeing none, the chair moves adoption of the amendment. Is there a second? Second from Representative Chauncey. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I close my amendment. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. And the motion carries. All right. The other amendment deals with some of the testimony that we got regarding grades K through 5 and the term table talk, because the Senate version removed an application for kindergarten through elementary on this, in this bill, and I just kind of personally thought it was important to add that back, because when you look at the namesake of this bill, it was an elementary school. But I thought we could enhance the definitions to see if the committee would find that more comfortable. So Jason, I'll let you pass that out and explain that to the committee.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'll first direct your attention to page 2, lines 16 through 20. The Senate had added a prohibition on conducting active shooter drills for grades kindergarten through 5. That language in those lines is being stricken. Over on page 1, the definition of active shooter drill is modified so that in line 15, active shooter drill includes for grades kindergarten through 5, instruction through tabletop exercises and identification of appropriate places for students to locate during an emergency. And then for grades 6 through 12, it is that information plus practice of active shooter drills would all be included in that definition as bifurcated among those two different grade categories. I will also direct the committee's attention on page 2 to the new definition of tabletop exercise for those who are not familiar with that phrase. You can see the definition there, which includes constructive problem solving as it relates to an armed intruder on the school campus or in the vicinity of the school, and may incorporate age-appropriate written or video scenarios for students to follow.
Thank you, Jason. Any question for Jason? Representative Steele.
It's a question on the amendment, maybe not for Jason, so if I need to wait, I will be glad to wait.
Go ahead.
Since
you used the word maybe, I want to make sure that Jason can answer it if you.
I was just curious why lines 32 through 36 with regards to having a parent opt out of this, did that get moved somewhere else?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, yes, that was in the prior amendment. So those lines were stricken in the prior amendment and moved into the language on page 4, line 29. You'll see that same language of the ability for a parent or person acting as parent to opt a student out of participation in an active shooter drill. That was previously adopted.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions for Jason on the amendment? Seeing none, I move adoption of the amendment. Is there a second? Representative Stockstill, thank you for the second. Is there discussion of the amendment? Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate all the assists. Make sure that she can see me over here. On the amendment, when it says may include constructive problem solving as it relates, do we have kind of an example of what we're going for on that, what that looks like in practice?
I'm relying on my memory of the testimony from Friday, and it's just, I think it's discussion of if this happens, then you would go under your desk, those simple types of things. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, does that also include, Like, there's some really good literature out there, age-appropriate books and things like that that have to do with active killing situations that are directed towards young people. Would that be possible to include, like, if a school district deems that is appropriate for their school? Would it include instructive, like when we do instruction with very young kids, we do a lot of Simon Says type of things to get them following directions quickly and really listening for the instructions. Would all of that kind of stuff be potentially included per the district? Or are we limiting what they can do to just hide under your desk or create a barricade?
The last line of the balloon says may incorporate age-appropriate written or video scenarios for students to follow. So I believe the answer to your question is yes in that sentence.
Right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Representative Schreiber and then Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure if the chair can answer this or someone or Jason, but lines 32 and 33 on page 1. It talks about strong evidence from not fewer than one well-designed and well-implemented experimental study. Are there experimental studies out there that demonstrate, I guess, strong evidence of during an active shooter drill?
Jason, I believe that was in the base bill and not the amendment, correct? Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And Jason, I think, is that a general definition we use when we talk about kind of evidence-based in the school world? And I'm getting a head shake from Dr. Harwood's also very Google-like assistant that the answer to that is no. Jason, go ahead.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I believe that particular phrase in lines 32 and 33 would be somewhat unique to this bill in terms of defining evidence-based. We haven't used that in other instances in the statute when we define evidence-based.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Representative Stockstill. Representative Boatman. I meant to say Schreiber. Representative Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to draw attention to a technical issue that I think it's more grammatically correct if in page 1, line 15, the word of follows the word practice.
Could you restate where you see that again? I didn't follow you.
Yes, page 1, line 15, it says active shooter drill includes, and then the balloon amendment, and then practice. And I was just going to suggest inserting the word of after practice to make it a good sentence.
Jason, is that necessary?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the revisor's office always strives to be grammatically correct in its drafting. And so, yes, we would accept that suggestion and also accept any motion by the committee to give the revisor discretion to fix any other technical corrections.
The maker of the amendment would be in favor of doing that. Thank you very much, Representative Boatman. Good check. Good catch. Any other questions? Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I have a devil's advocate question regarding this tabletop exercises and identification of appropriate places. Doesn't that all fall under age-appropriate education? Is it necessary to define it as such?
I took that based on the testimony that, number one, the Senate completely took everything out with the elementary schools. So when I decided to bring it back, and one of the conferees said it means things like tabletop, I thought, well, for clarity, let's add, the three of us need to be still. I thought I would add the word back in, so if somebody was trying to interpret this in the future, they would know what we would have in mind. And then because it's a word we don't use very often, I thought a definition would just kind of add clarity so we always know what we mean.
Okay, I do appreciate that K through 5 has been added back in.
Thank you. Anybody else, any questions on the amendment? Okay, seeing none. Did I get a second on this one? I did, Representative Stockstill. Okay, I will close my motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. I think, I know I had a couple of more amendments. I think other people had amendments, but it is after our allotted time. But I thank the committee for helping us make as much forward progress as could be made today, and we will resume amendments to this bill, then discussion, and then a vote on the bill tomorrow. And then we will also have work the other bills we heard today. I want to thank everybody. I know we don't enjoy going super fast, and that's just the cards we got dealt this year, and you guys are really being a wonderful committee and helping us to be efficient. So thank you all, and we are adjourned.